All right, folks, back on the record. Civil Hour versus Lindsay Partin, CR 2018-030462. Court will note that both the parties and all the attorneys are present. I know we have folks in the gallery. The public is here today. And again, I just want to start off before we bring the jury in, reminding the folks in the gallery, please remember my cautions from yesterday. If you were not here yesterday, I did caution that in order to maintain the decorum and the integrity of the trial, the court is not going to tolerate any types of disruptions. Again, I do understand it's an emotional situation for both sides. However, this process can only work if we maintain order, and the court will do whatever is necessary to enforce that, which again, just reminding you, I can just bar you from this courtroom. I can even hold you in contempt. You could go to jail. I don't want any of that to happen, so just do your best to maintain civility. Counsel, I'm not aware of any issues that need to be addressed before we bring the jury in. Are the parties aware of any issues at this point?
I do not.
Very good. Ms. Wilson, you go get our jury. We'll get started. Everybody have a seat, please. Jurors, place your lanyards on. Thank you very much. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Jurors, before we get started today, you know the drill, hopefully by now. Anyone have any issues with the admonitions that you need to report to the court? Very good. With that, Ms. Hiley, I believe the court is ready to proceed. If the state's ready to proceed with calling the next witness.
Yes, Dr. Michael Young.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat, please. Watch your step.
Good morning, Doctor. Before we begin, you'll notice we do have a couple of folks from the media here. Do you have any objection to potentially your facial image being projected on media?
No.
All right, very good. Ms. Hiley, you may proceed when you're ready.
Good morning.
Morning.
Would you state your name for the record, please?
Michael Brian Young.
And would you spell your last name?
It's spelled Y-A-N-G.
And you are a doctor?
Yes.
And how long have you been a doctor?
Well, including medical training since 1993, so that would be 26 years.
All right. And could you briefly describe what your background education is to be a medical doctor?
Yes, I trained at Harvard Medical School, and then I did my internship at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Boston. Then I did my residency at University of Southern California in ophthalmology. Then I did a pediatric ophthalmology fellowship at University of Michigan. Then I went into practice.
All right. And could you briefly describe what that fellowship is that you did at Michigan, the pediatric ophthalmology one?
Yes, it's a one-year pediatric ophthalmology fellowship.
And what does that mean?
Well, it's an after residency additional training that you do in order to be particularly good at the subspecialty of pediatric ophthalmology.
Okay. I think for a lot of lay people, it's confusing the difference between optometry and ophthalmology. Can you explain the difference?
So yes, ophthalmology is a medical subspecialty. So we go to medical school for 4 years, we train as a regular doctor until we reach the point where we want to subspecialize. And optometrists, they go to 4 years of optometry school. They do general eye exams, and they have some knowledge there, and some of them are very good with that. But their exposure to complicated patients with serious medical problems and things of that nature is very limited.
And specifically, what is ophthalmology?
Well, ophthalmology is a specialty that is the study of the eyes and surgery and diseases of the eye.
All right. Do you have any board certifications?
Yes, I'm board certified in ophthalmology.
And what do you have to do to get that board certification?
Well, you have to complete residency training, and you also have to then be qualified to sit for a written examination. Then after you pass the written examination, then you qualify to be examined orally. An oral examination takes about 3 hours, and you have to pass that. And then once you pass that, you have to continue to, well, it used to be you could be grandfathered into a lifetime certification, but then starting sometime before I was qualified to do it, you had to recertify every 10 years. So you have to have continued medical education in order to qualify and pass the recertification.
All right. Where do you currently work?
I currently work at Cincinnati Children's Hospital.
And what is your position there?
I'm a professor of ophthalmology, and I'm also a division director in pediatric ophthalmology.
And how long have you been with Cincinnati Children's Hospital?
I've been there for 17 years.
And you said you're also a professor. How much of your time is, can you kind of describe what that professorship is? Is it classroom time? Is it hands-on training time with patients? How does that work?
Yeah, so we have residents who, these are ophthalmology residents who rotate through children's, and they spend a certain amount of time with us. We also have fellows that we train, so that's kind of like me when I was in Michigan. And there is some classroom time, so where we actually teach medical students and residents with didactic lectures, presentations.
In addition to being a professor, during the course of your duties with Cincinnati Children's, do you also see patients?
Yes.
What are the reasons for seeing patients that you have?
You mean the type of problems that they have?
Yes.
Sure. So the kind of problems that they have are quite varied. I mean, they include strabismus, which is a misalignment of the eyes, or they may have cataracts, glaucoma, retinopathy of prematurity, various inpatient consults for various diseases, including patients who have cancer of various types, clotting disorders, corneal infections, and also consulting for patients who we ask to evaluate for potential retinal hemorrhages associated with abusive head trauma, such as in this case.
Can you give an estimate of how many patients you evaluate in a year?
So, as division director for the last few years, I see fewer than I used to, but at one point I was probably seeing 2,500, 3,000 patients a year.
And doctor, have you previously testified in a courtroom?
Yes, I have.
And have you previously we'll get there, it's the morning. Have you previously been declared an expert in your testimony?
Well, I understand that there's expert testimony where you're being asked to come in on a case that's unrelated to a person. So I have not in that sense.
Okay.
I've only testified on behalf of patients or cases that I've been involved in.
Okay. So you haven't given an outside opinion, but you've testified on behalf of patients previously?
Correct. I don't recall ever having given an outside opinion.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Doctor, do you have a curriculum vitae?
Yes, I do.
And that curriculum vitae is a summary of your qualifications and educational background, different
Yes.
things you've done within your career?
Yes.
If I may approach the witness with State's Exhibit 20.
You bet. I'm good.
You recognize that
Yes.
exhibit? And is that your curriculum vitae?
Yes.
Are there any corrections or additions that you see that are glaring that need to be made?
No, this is basically correct. This is from last July, so it needs updating a little bit, but essentially it's correct.
All right. At this time, the state moves to admit Exhibit 20,
Defense? No objection. Exhibit 20 will be admitted.
and the state asks that Dr. Young be qualified as an expert in the area of pediatric ophthalmology.
Defense wish to voir dire on qualifications. All right, Dr. Young will be Dr. Young will be qualified in the area of pediatric ophthalmology. You may proceed.
Thank you. Doctor, as a pediatric ophthalmologist at Cincinnati Children's, are you ever asked to review cases involving suspected child abuse?
Yes.
Pursuant to such a request, did you come into contact with Hannah Weshy, date of birth 1/11/2015?
Yes.
When did you come into contact with her?
So I believe it was in 2016. Was that the date of? I didn't look at the date of the actual exam. when I was
Okay.
reviewing the case, but
Well, let me ask you this then. Did you prepare records when you did the exam, your results from that exam?
Yes, I did.
And those would be part of the Cincinnati Children's medical records?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. If I may approach the State's Exhibit 8 and 19.
You may approach. Sorry. No, sir. And that's the scans. Record certification.
Doctor, go ahead and take a moment and look through State's Exhibit 19.
Yes. Yes.
After looking at State's Exhibit 19, are you able to recognize
Yes.
that exhibit?
Yes,
And
that
are
is.
those the records you prepared?
Yes, those are.
And those are related to your observations of Hanawashee?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, could you tell us then when your examination occurred?
Yes, I'm sorry. It was March of 2018. March 9th, 2000. Sorry, March. It was March 11th of 2018. I completed the note on March 12th, although I wrote two notes. One was because the initial note written by the resident, I could not access it through a computer glitch, so I wrote a separate note on March 11th, 2018, when I actually took the photographs, and then I completed the resident's note the following day.
All right. Doctor, can you describe your observations as you first came into contact with Hannah?
So this was a consult. I remember that she was unconscious. I remember that she was her face was a bit swollen, and as indicated in the notes, she had some eyelid swelling and a little bit of ecchymosis, or what we called a blood discoloration on the left upper eyelid. The rest of her anterior segment, or the front part of her eye, was normal. We dilated her eyes, and then we looked inside the eyes. And
Doctor, I'm going to stop you before we get to that point. You talked about some ecchymosis. What is ecchymosis?
So basically, if you have an injury that's severe enough to cause a little bit of bleeding, you can have kind of this bluish, purplish discoloration, indicating that there's been some blood there.
And I'm going to approach you with what has previously been admitted as State's Exhibit 46. Doctor, do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
So that's a picture of the patient.
And do you recognize, or you talked about ecchymosis, do you see that in that picture?
Yes, so there's ecchymosis of the left upper eyelid, as well as a little bit on the left lower lid, and you can see maybe some discoloration, some bleeding as well on the side of the head.
Okay, doctor, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen. That's right there next to you. You see that State's Exhibit 46 there?
Yes, now it's coming.
Okay. Can you go ahead and circle the part that you're talking about when you, what you saw when you came into contact with her?
Yeah, so this is the area of ecchymosis, and there's a little bit here too.
Okay.
And
Do you know if that would have been there when you saw her on the 11th?
So this picture, I don't know when this picture was taken, but yes, I mean, I documented the fact that I saw ecchymosis on the, well, what I said was that I saw it on the left upper eyelid in the medial aspect. So there are actually a few more ecchymosis here than what I wrote on my exam, and
Okay.
so
when you're
this is-
talking about, I just want to, if you could just circle the part that you saw when you examined her on March 11th.
yeah, so I would say a medial aspect would be this area, generally speaking, but I couldn't be 100% sure that I didn't include this, or maybe there was an extension from here to there.
Okay. And I'm not seeing, you're not pushing hard enough, so we're not seeing
Oh.
what you're talking about.
So I thought I'm circling it. Is it not showing up
Okay,
there?
there it is, okay.
Oh, okay, all right. It's showing up on my screen, but not there. So generally speaking, this would be the medial part, but But, you know, it's possible that, that I meant to include this part as well. I didn't mention anything on the lower eye.
You said this part.
Sorry, this part
Okay,
here.
thank you.
That would generally be more central, but it's possible that I included that. There certainly was something here, but that's a little bit off the eyelid. And this portion is on the lower eyelid. It's possible that that was milder and I didn't catch my attention. Or perhaps some blood, you know, may have shifted from part of the eyelid to another part of the eyelid, depending on how long this, you know, how much later this picture was taken.
All right. Doctor, after you made initial contact and your external observations of Hannah, what was the next step of your evaluation?
Well, the next step is to go ahead and dilate the patient. And actually, the resident had already performed part of the external exam. And so if their examination of the external part and the pupils in particular, and there's a agreement by the primary team to allow us to go ahead and dilate the eyes, we then go ahead and put drops in the eyes that dilate the pupils that allow us to then look inside the eye and examine the inside of the eye.
And in this case with Hannah Weshy, is that what you did?
Yes.
Can you briefly describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how you conduct one of these exams with the dilating of the eyes and what comes next? What's that process?
Sure. So we put the drops to dilate the eyes, and then once the pupils are adequately dilated, then we have a special instrument called an indirect ophthalmoscope. It's like a little hat. You wear it, and then there's a light source, and then there's two lenses that go over your eyes, and then you have another larger lens that you hold in front of you, and without going into the details of the optics, it allows you to see the inside of the eye in pretty good detail.
In preparation for your testimony today, did you prepare a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, I did.
All right. If I may approach the witness with States Exhibits 21 through 38.
Did you say, I'm sorry, 38?
21 through 38, yes. Doctor, go ahead and take a look at those.
Yes.
Doctor, what's the first slide there? What's the States Exhibit number on that?
21.
Okay. All right, Doctor, having looked at those, are those the PowerPoint
Yes.
slides that you prepared? And are those that are marked as observations of the patient's eye, are those the observations you had of Hannah's
Yes.
eyes?
Yes, that's correct.
At this time, the state moves to admit States Exhibits 21 through 38.
Defense?
We have no objection.
States 21 through 38 will be admitted. You may publish at your will. 38.
Flashed up. There it is. Okay. States Exhibit 21, you see that there?
Yes.
Could you go ahead and, are you able to see that on
Yes.
your screen? Doctor, could you go ahead and describe for us what it is we're looking at?
So this is a schematic of the eye, a cross section part. We'll kind of cut away to show you the different structures, different parts of the eye. So this would be the front part of the eye that you're seeing here. You can see the cornea, that's the clear shield that you see through, the iris, which is the color part of your eye, and then the pupil, which is the opening in the middle. Behind that is the lens, and then the white part of the eye is the sclera. There are some layers on top of that, the conjunctiva, but generally speaking, what you're seeing, the white part is the sclera. And then this cutaway allows you to see the inside of the eye, which includes the retina, which is a transparent layer that is like the film in the camera, kind of our analogy, and then the optic nerve, which connects the eye to the brain. And then you can see the blood vessels emanating from the optic nerve.
So when you are looking at a patient's eye, and when you would have been looking at Hannah's eyes, what are you looking at?
So we're looking at everything. We have a systematic approach to it. We look at the eyelid, as I mentioned earlier, and then we start from the front part of the eye, basically move to the back part of the eye. We'd be looking for evidence of trauma to the sclera, which would be evidenced by bleeding on the white part of the eye. We would be looking for evidence of distortion of the pupil or bleeding in the front chamber of the eye, which is the space between the cornea, which is the clear shield, and the iris. So you can see here that there's a little bit of a space here, okay, between the iris and the cornea. Then you have the pupil. Then we would be looking for signs of cataracts and things like that, cloudiness of the lens or if it's dislocated. Then we move systematically to the back part of the eye, looking at the vitreous, which is the jelly inside the eye. It's a transparent layer, but it's a transparent jelly, I should say, but you could see things that may be floating in the vitreous or in the space behind the vitreous in front of the retina. And you're looking at the retina, looking for signs of inflammation, hemorrhage, edema, which is swelling, which usually makes it turn white. And then you're looking at the optic nerve to see if it's swollen or elevated, or if there's anything else abnormal with that.
All right.
Okay.
Doctor, States Exhibit 22, what is that showing?
So this is a normal photograph of the fundus or the retina. You can see the optic nerve on the right side, and that looks, nice and clear. And then you have the normal retina. This little depression in the middle is what we call the fovea. It's the sharpest point of the vision. And then you're looking at blood vessels coming out from the optic nerve. And again, the retina is relatively transparent, so you're actually seeing through it to another layer of the eye called the choroid. So these are the things that we kind of look for.
All right. States Exhibit 23.
So this is the piece of equipment that I was referring to earlier. It's called the indirect ophthalmoscope. This is the examiner. You can see he's wearing a hat, and then this device comes down over his eyes, and light is shined into the eye, and an image is reflected back, and then we can see that image. So you're holding this lens here in front of you, shining it and focusing into the inside of the eye. That allows you to see the details that I showed in the previous photograph. We also look left and right, look as far towards the equator of the eye as possible. We don't have just the view that I showed in the previous photograph.
All right. And States Exhibit 24.
So this is a RET cam. So it's a camera, a special camera that we've had for a couple of decades at least. It came about because of the need to have an easier way of documenting what we see inside the eye, as opposed to the old system where there was a special camera that was used, and then you had to develop the pictures and things of that nature.
All right. And I want to skip to States Exhibit 29. Actually, I think I went to the wrong one. Yeah, okay, let's do 29. Got
Okay.
there. You can go ahead and tell us what we're looking at in States Exhibit 29.
Okay, this is the subject's right eye, and we're looking at the central part of the fundus or the retina, and you can see, using the analogy of the normal picture that you saw earlier, this is the optic nerve, and this is the center of vision, and then you have the blood vessels coming out like so, just like before, except in this situation, obviously, The image is a little bit blurry, but it's adequate to see all the hemorrhages throughout. The hemorrhages are in different layers and of the eye. The macula of the center is relatively spared. Sorry, that was in this area. And you can see enough of the optic nerve to see that there isn't any significant edema or swelling of the optic nerve. And like I said, the hemorrhages are too many to count. If we had a photograph, we could probably count them, but when you're looking at them, there's just so many of them.
Okay. Could you go ahead and just mark some of those hemorrhages, just that?
Yeah. So
it's clear.
here's a hemorrhage. These are all hemorrhages here. You can see the blotchy redness there. This darker spot here, and here, these are all pre-retinal hemorrhages. So they're in front of the retina, possibly into the vitreous jelly, which is that clear jelly that fills the inside of the eye. And so it's either in the jelly or it's in the space between that jelly and the retina itself. You've got these dot blot hemorrhages that are intraretinal, and then there are some flame hemorrhages here. Just sounds just like that. It's like a flame spot, a flame streak. That would be considered consistent with nerve fiber layer hemorrhages.
Doctor, I believe we looked at an exhibit of what a normal eye looks like, and it doesn't have hemorrhages like you've described.
Correct.
Is that correct? And it says posterior pole. What does that mean?
Well, if you think of the eye like a globe, you have the North Pole, you have the South Pole. So we kind of talk about this general back area as the posterior pole.
All right.
Okay.
States Exhibit 30. Let me clear that off.
Yeah, so I've labeled this as the temporal aspect. Temporal just meaning that's closer to the ear. So if it's in the patient's right eye, I'd be looking towards the side part of the inside of the eye, closer to the ear. And this is showing that the hemorrhages go out pretty far here. You can see this would be the furthest extent that we could get with the camera, and that's pretty far out. You can see some of the vitreous hemorrhages. You don't actually see the optic nerve, which is probably somewhere here. So this would be potentially like the center of vision here, and so you can see that we're getting further out. And so it's showing that there's more hemorrhages further out than what we saw earlier.
States Exhibit 31.
So this is an attempt to look at the nasal retina here. And so
What
again,
does that mean, nasal?
Oh, so more towards the nose.
Okay.
So you have temporal and you have medial or nasal. So it's more towards the nose. So we're now directing the indirect ophthalmoscope. So we're looking more towards this side of the retina. And I'm sorry, this is the retcam, but it's corresponding to what I would be trying to see with my indirect ophthalmoscope. And again, here you have the optic nerve. You have those same hemorrhages that help you to identify where you are relative to the other picture. And this would be close to the center of vision. And there's still hemorrhages out here that you can see. And generally speaking, we can see further out with our indirect ophthalmoscope than the camera can actually take pictures.
All right.
And this is superior.
This is States Exhibit 32 for the record.
Superior just means we're looking up now. Okay, and here again is the optic nerve from the previous, if you want to correlate this with the previous photograph. And this is probably the center of vision there. And so we're looking more periphery. You can see that the bleeding is pretty extensive and continues to go further beyond the original view. Yeah,
33.
Sorry, and then this is the inferior view, so you're looking down. And again, for reference, here's the optic nerve, here's the vitreous hemorrhage, and then the bleeding continues beyond that.
States Exhibit 34.
Okay, so this is the left eye, again, the central retina, posterior pole, however you want to describe that. Here's the optic nerve again. This is a perhaps slightly clearer image. We have vitreous hemorrhages here. We have dot and blot hemorrhages, and you've got some flame hemorrhages here and there, and blood vessels again. This is the center of vision. You can see some hemorrhages here and there near that area.
State's Exhibit 35.
Okay, so same thing. We're looking temporally more towards the ear. Again, here's your optic nerve, center of vision, and then you can still see hemorrhages out here, out here, out here, even though it's a little bit blurry.
State's Exhibit 36.
Okay, and then so again, this is nasally, again, the optic nerve, center of vision on the left side, and then the hemorrhages you can still see peripherally, more towards the nose.
State's Exhibit 37.
Okay, same eye, optic nerve, center of vision, and you can see the hemorrhages up here, and little streaks there and hemorrhages out there.
State's Exhibit 38.
Okay, same eye again, the optic nerve, center of vision, hemorrhage, and you can still see the hemorrhages out here.
All right. Doctor, if you could briefly summarize what all of that means.
So, so there is extensive hemorrhages in all three layers of the retina, and it goes far peripherally, at the very least to the equator. Think about the equator of the Earth, and so the equator of the eye, you can still see the hemorrhages there. And the constellation of all of those hemorrhages, the extensiveness of it, is the absence of optic nerve edema. Those are all most consistent with non-accidental trauma, abusive head trauma. That was the diagnosis in this case.
And you said those are all consistent with non-accidental trauma. You said abusive head trauma. Are you referring to those as the same thing?
Well, those are different names that have been given. The diagnosis over the years. The most recent terminology would be abusive head trauma.
All right. And if you could explain to us what that means.
Well, what that means is that there is injury to the patient, thought to be from the violent shaking of the patient that can cause the vitreous jelly inside the eye to cause a shear force along the retina because it's attached to the retina, and as the two different substances move past each other, there is shearing of blood vessels that can lead to these hemorrhages.
Doctor, is it shaking alone, or could impact also be involved in that?
Well, it depends on. So it could be both, but primarily it's thought to be the shaking. The patients who have just purely impact are much less to have hemorrhages, and the number of hemorrhages are much smaller, and they typically are not in all three layers or extensive like this. We see patients who've gone in through motor vehicle accidents, and as long as the eye itself is not directly traumatized severely, the mere fact that they have an impact on their head or something like that doesn't produce these kinds of hemorrhages.
So, doctor, I know we've talked about it, but I'm going to ask you now regarding this non-accidental trauma, abusive head trauma. Based upon your training, education, and experience, and to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, what is your opinion as to the cause of the injuries that you saw in Hannah's eyes?
Yeah, my medical opinion is that it's due to abusive head trauma.
If I may have just a moment.
Take your time. Mr. Payne, will you be doing the cross?
I am.
All right, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Thanks. I'm just getting ready. My name is Chris Pagan. We've never met. I represent the defense, and I have some questions.
Sure.
And just give me a second to get the paperwork right here. Jimmy, do we have defense exhibit stickers? I'm likely to use the coroner's report. Do you want to use yours? Well, I don't want to label multiple things at the same. While she's doing that, do you mind if I look at the exhibits that you have? Mostly I want to see your notes. Thanks. I was going to use Dr. Dean's report. She's going to testify later. I didn't want to mark mine. Oh, that's fine. Thank you. All right, so let me start with this. First of all, good morning. I've heard you state two opinions in the case, one relating to the hemorrhages you saw in the eye. And you have to say yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. And then a second one about an ultimate diagnosis being abusive head trauma, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you would agree with me that those opinions are medical opinions,
Yes.
and they do not identify a perpetrator in this case.
Correct.
That's not your role?
Correct.
You're a doctor, correct?
Yes.
And you evaluate the medical evidence.
Yes.
I was going to ask you about the mechanism of injury. I understood abusive head trauma to be a medical diagnosis that indicates a viewpoint that there was an abusive act that caused the hemorrhaging that was unknown to medical evidence. Is that your understanding of abusive head trauma?
I'm sorry, state that again?
No, it's a bad question, isn't it? You testified that your diagnosis was abusive head trauma.
Correct.
And then you further testified that it was your belief based on the evidence that the mechanism of injury was shaking.
Correct.
Okay. Are you aware that that is not an opinion shared by the other doctors that the state has called or will call in this case?
I'm not aware of the testimony of the other doctors or what they plan to say.
I'm going to show you, and if I can approach the witness, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State Exhibit 11, and I will proffer to you that this evidence is going to be presented to the jury later today. And take a look at that, and it's the coroner's report in this case.
Yes, I've reviewed it.
Okay, you have reviewed it? Okay.
Yes.
And it has the coroner's evaluation of internal injuries and its examination, and external, but also has conclusions, correct? On the front of it, on page 1. Take a look at those, and when you're done, I'm going to show them to the jury.
And I would object to that.
Let's approach.
I can just cross off.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed, you may hear testimony relating to the opinions, potential opinions of other experts in the case. Those experts have not testified yet. You are not to consider them at this point. For the truth of the matter asserted, they're not substantive evidence. They're strictly being presented in the presentation cross-examined at this point. So, Mr. Pagan, with that instruction, you may proceed.
Okay. All right. I want to explore the shaking issue with you. And you have in front of you a county coroner's report, correct?
Yes.
It's identified as an opinion.
Yes.
It's dated on 4/19/2018.
Yes.
It's signed by Dr. Dorothy Dean.
Yes.
She's a pathologist
Yes.
and a deputy coroner for Hamilton County.
Yes.
And I assume you've had contact with her in the context of this case?
No, I have not.
Okay. This is the first time you've seen this report?
No, it isn't.
Okay. You understand that her conclusion is that the cause of death was traumatic brain injury due to blunt impacts to the head?
Correct.
Okay. And that's different than a mechanism of injury that would be shaking?
Well, it could be both.
Okay. Well, a blunt impact is a blunt object
Yes.
having contact with the head, correct?
It could be that, or it could be in the act of shaking one's head, it strikes one's chest, and it's sufficiently flexible to be able to do that in various cases. So, I'm not, I'm not aware of the evidence. I don't know that there's any blunt objects that were shown to be the instrument of, impact on the patient. But blunt could mean various things.
Okay. Nowhere in this report does the phrase shaking appear, correct?
Correct.
All right. Were you aware that, and when did you see Hannah? Do you know? Do you have the notes? I have your notes.
You mean what time of the day, or?
Not time of the day, what day? You understand she was in the hospital?
Right. I think it was March 11th. Was the date that I consulted on her.
And do you know when she died?
I've either was told or saw the day of death as being approximately 10 days later, I believe.
10 days from March 8th when she presented.
Right.
Okay. So she died on March 18th.
That's my understanding. Yes.
Okay. And then you have the report there that says that the autopsy was done on March 19th.
Yes.
And were you aware that Dr. Dean shaved the back of Hannah's head?
That's typical in terms of trying to look at the brain and skull.
Are you aware that she found a bruise that had otherwise not been discovered by Children's Hospital people?
Which one are you referring to? The subgaleal hemorrhage, or?
Yeah, in the back of the head.
Mm-hmm. So I did not compare what the other doctors found with what the coroner said, so I wasn't aware of that.
Are you aware that Dr. Dean immediately called law enforcement and explained to law enforcement that Hannah had a severe raised, swollen bruise on the back of her head?
Your Honor.
Approach.
All right. And I apologize for the delay because I've lost my train of thought a little bit. But what I was getting at is Dr. Dean did an autopsy, correct?
Correct.
It was done on March 19th, correct?
Yes.
It was done after your eye exam of Hannah, correct?
Yes.
All right. The statement you gave to the jury was that you suspect that the mechanism of injury was shaking, correct?
Correct.
I pointed out to you that Dr. Dean has a statement about blunt impacts, which is different to a layperson than shaking,
Yes.
right? The literature indicates that when evaluating for shaken baby syndrome, the absence of blunt impacts is good evidence that shaking might have caused the injuries here, correct?
Not necessarily.
Okay. The existence of blunt impacts to the head is evidence that is the cause of the hematomas and the hemorrhaging, correct?
No, not necessarily.
Okay. Doctor, you're aware that Dr. Dean Are you aware that Dr. Dean doesn't address shaking as a mechanism in her report?
I'm not sure, yes, I am aware of that, but I'm not aware of, coroners being empowered or routinely, not empowered, or routinely indicating that.
You're aware that on 3/20/18, are you aware that Dr. Dean called law enforcement because of her new finding that Hannah had a severe raised and swollen bruise on the back of her head?
I was not aware of that.
Okay. A severe raised and swollen bruise.
Objection, Your Honor. He just asked the question.
I'm going to ask a different question.
Let me hear the entirety of the question, and then we'll address it.
Do you agree with me that a severe raised and swollen bruise is a blunt impact?
It might be. I'm not qualified, I don't think, to actually interpret
All right.
the coroner's finding. I have not had a history of correlating what coroners find and what the clinician evaluates and correlating those two. That's not been part of my training.
Okay. You have your notes there?
Which ones? My
The
notes.
notes from Children's Medical
Yes.
Hospital.
Yes.
All right. And maybe you know it, maybe you don't, but are you aware that the records, the total number of records in the Children's Medical Hospital records exceed 4,500 pages? Do you know that?
I didn't know that, but it wouldn't surprise me. Yes.
Okay. And I assume you didn't go through them all.
I did not.
Okay. And the notes that you added to that 4,500 plus collection of medical notes is about 15 pages, correct?
Yes.
And you have it in front of you,
Yes.
more or less, correct?
Correct. This is all I remember putting in.
Right. And nowhere in those notes do you address shaking or the mechanism of injury, correct?
Correct.
All right. And sometime in the summer of 2018, you engaged in some email correspondence with Kelly Hiley.
Yes.
And you're aware that that email was supplied to me as part of the exchange of documents in this case.
I understood that they were discoverable, yes. but
Okay.
I didn't know that they were actually
All
sent
right.
to you.
And you were asked to either agree or disagree with the following statement. Hannah Weshy's injuries are consistent with abusive head trauma. Correct?
I haven't reviewed my emails with her, but
Okay,
it's
I can show it
possible.
to you.
Okay.
I'm probably gonna label it. You want, you have one mark, or is it?
No, I don't.
I need a sticker. I got one here. And I'm gonna label this one-page email as Defense Exhibit B, I think. Can I press the latest? I'm not gonna publish it.
Yeah.
I need a marker to write B.
All right.
We'll do it later. I don't mean to be in your personal space, but this is just the easiest way to do it. That's Defense Exhibit B, or it will be a B when I can get the pen to write, okay?
Yes.
All right. And that's your name?
Yes.
Okay, that's your email address?
Yes.
To Kelly Hiley,
Yes.
okay? The date is 7/11/2018 at 2:58.
Yes.
It's in regard to Hannah Weshy with her date of birth.
Yes.
Okay. The question that I presented to you is presented right here, correct? Take your time.
Yes.
All right. And your response was,
I agree, yes.
okay. So you agreed that her injuries that you observed were consistent with abusive head trauma?
Yes.
Okay. Nowhere did you explicate about your viewpoint that the mechanism of injury was shaking.
Correct.
So nowhere in your report, correct?
It's not in my report, correct.
Nowhere in your email?
Correct.
So for the very first time in the history of this case, from any note, document from you, you've introduced the issue of shaking, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you would agree that it comes as a surprise to the defense because it's never been presented from you in any other document?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. I think you testified that you've not been an independent expert for third parties.
Correct.
All right. You've only been an expert witness for people that you've treated or seen.
Yes.
Okay. How many times have you been an expert witness?
In that sense, the second sense that you just
In
described?
that sense, yes.
I've only been in a trial once. I have done depositions less than 5-6 times, I would guess, or written letters on behalf of various legal counsel.
All right. And before I move on and forget, did you ever tell any of the agents here at the state here, the prosecutors, about your shaking mechanism hypothesis? Did it ever come out of your mouth?
I believe so.
Okay.
It's possible that it was assumed underlying our discussions, but I don't remember the verbatim details of every conversation we've had. I have supplied documents and some studies and things like that, where that's been listed as the presumed mechanism.
Okay. So you've had conversations with them?
Mhm.
You don't recollect using the term shaking?
I don't recall specifically doing it. I may have.
You may have, but you don't know.
I don't know for sure.
There would be no documentation to either support or undermine that premise, that idea that you communicated this to them.
Well, so
Is there a document?
no, I think I did talk to them about that, about the possibility of this, we talked about the various names for this. I mean, non-accidental trauma, it may not have been like a detailed discussion, but I think we may have talked about the fact that, there are various names for this entity: abusive head trauma. It's gone through evolution of terminology, non-accidental trauma, shaken baby syndrome, things like that. So the very fact that we may even have mentioned that phrase, shaken baby syndrome, would suggest that that's part of the thought of the what's going on here.
Okay. Did you ever put it to writing?
I don't think so. I haven't reviewed all my emails, but I don't think I actually wrote that. But again, it's in some of the information packets about this. I think I sent a consensus statement of various medical societies, and that may have gone through. So if you want to look for the word shaking, it probably was in something that I sent.
To them?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you remember sending a journal article to the prosecutor in this case?
Yes.
All right. It's about abusive head trauma?
Yes.
Okay. It's not about shaken baby syndrome?
Well, it's just different terminology that we use. It has evolved over time,
Okay.
and I think it's in there because it covers some of the history.
All right. I'm not going to read this in front of the jury. It's many, many pages, but what I was getting at before about your experience in testifying, Do you understand, and I think you do because you just did it, that the legal standard for opinions is a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
All right. And because you testified in a murder trial under oath to this jury about that, I would assume you know what that means.
Yes.
Okay. What does it mean?
Reasonable medical certainty?
Reasonable degree of medical certainty. What does it mean?
Yes, it means that based on evidence of the findings of the case, and then also the consensus and the best scientific evidence and opinions of the medical community, especially in my specialty of pediatric ophthalmology, or retina specialists, or all the other clinicians who are interested in this area, that this is the most plausible explanation for the findings of the patient.
Okay. So the level of certainty is what? Plausibility? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's the most plausible, it's the most reasonable, it's the one that does not have any other findings that are consistent with something else that could explain the findings.
The mechanism of injury being shaking,
Correct.
that is a possibility on these facts.
It's not only a possibility, but it's the most likely, and at the standard of medical certainty, that is the diagnosis.
Okay. I mean, you're stating your opinion on the fact that a shaking mechanism is the most likely, in your opinion, despite the evidence of substantial bruising and impacts upon Hannah's head.
Correct.
So is this jury led to, are you telling this jury that the bruising, the substantial bruising to the back of her head is a less likely cause of her fatal injuries than a shaking mechanism?
No, you're asking about the fatal injury. Okay, so the fatal injury is different from the eye finding. Okay, so one can have both shaking and a traumatic impact, whatever that, the explanation for the extra bruise or any of other reasons, those can be fatal for different reasons, but the eye finding itself is most consistent with a shaking mechanism. So one can be shaken and have impact, and that can lead to loss of life potentially. One can survive any of those things as well. And so we have patients who survive the shaking mechanism, they don't have impact, and they still have the eye findings.
Right, okay. So the eye findings are immaterial to the death and the mechanism of death in this case?
Correct. I mean, somebody could die or they may not die, and there are different age groups in which they may or may not be more vulnerable to and it also depends on what happened to them. I mean, there are patients who are just simply shaken, but they weren't actually struck on some object or other. So what I can say is that we see lots of patients who have severe head trauma from various other mechanisms, and they don't get this kind of hemorrhage.
Say the last part again?
They don't get this kind of hemorrhage.
Beginning, before that.
So we see lots of patients who have head trauma for other reasons, known reasons, witness reasons, like a motor vehicle accident or something like that, where it can be pretty severe, and we don't see these kinds of hemorrhages.
Right. But again, just so I'm clear, the eye injury that you're responsible for, that you have evaluated here, likely has you cannot connect the death or the cause of death in this case.
No, well, I try to say it a little bit more clearly. Shaking resulting in hemorrhages like this, this extensive hemorrhages are usually associated with some kind of severe brain injury. Whether there's any impact involved, you can still get swelling of the brain if there's no impact of the head on actual blunt objects. Now, it's possible that maybe the patient strikes their head on their chest and back and forth and things like that, as a part of the shaking and may not reach this level of trauma that you observed by the coroner. But one can still get brain injury from that. Whether it actually reaches the point of causing death, is variable in terms of the patient. Many of them have cognitive damage even if they survive.
Isn't the fact of the matter that children's hospital professionals like you just missed the bruising to the back of the head? The impacts to the back of the head? It's true, right?
Well, I don't examine the back of the head.
Okay.
Okay. As to whether the other doctors missed it, I can't say. I mean, it's.
Well, you had 4,500 pages of medical records from Children's Hospital.
Well, I would say that there's an inconsistency, obviously. But if there are, were they asked to search every square inch of the body, I don't know what the protocol is on that side.
Okay. Well, I mean, you got a patient that is presented to Children's Hospital with head injuries, correct? So an evaluation of the head would seem to be what the role of the medical professionals would be.
Right. So I agree that there's an inconsistency, and they may have missed it, but I don't know for sure. I mean, I don't know if what children said in response to them, was this part of the neurosurgery process? It hasn't been ruled out. Was there something else that caused a problem that they didn't find on initial evaluation? I just can't speak to that.
And that substantial bruising to the back of the head that was discovered by Dr. Dean on March the 20th is immaterial to your opinions and assessment.
Correct.
You've given two opinions here again, the hemorrhaging and then the abusive head trauma, correct?
Yes.
That's the extent of your opinions.
Yes.
No more, no less.
Yes.
Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. This has been a very right? I'm going to show you this picture. Jamie, can we get that back on? Thanks. Let me show you the picture. I'm going to show you what's been labeled State Exhibit 46. Take a look at that while I ask my colleagues.
Action, Mr. Pagan. Hold on. Okay. Never mind.
I'm going to show it. It's been admitted, so I'm going to put it on the screen
Okay.
for the jury to see if that's okay. Okay, and you see the image there?
Yes.
You identified it as Hannah? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, and you went through with the prosecutor the eye bruising that you observed?
Yes.
And then I heard you make specific mention that you had, you might have observed the bruising underneath the eye, but you had a concern that perhaps the blood might have shifted from one injury to another.
It's possible. I'm not absolutely certain.
Okay. And you didn't take this photograph?
I did not take this photograph.
You don't know when the photograph was taken?
No, I don't.
All right. But that was an important thing to you in your answer because you had to have either had a direct memory of the
Right.
patient or know the date in time of the evaluation of the picture because blood shifts.
It can shift on the eyelid, or it may have been that I may have labeled that incorrectly. I'm not sure, but I did make note of ecchymosis on the eyelids.
So, I mean, you would agree with me that it would be problematic for a witness to identify bruises in a photograph where that witness doesn't know who took the picture, when the picture was taken, or where the picture was taken.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And that's because the way the body operates, the way bruises are, blood shifts over time.
It might be that I just simply missed it in terms of my documentation of the eyelid, because that wasn't the critical part of my evaluation.
And it wasn't just part, I mean, what you're describing here wasn't in your notes, correct?
Correct. I agree that it's inconsistent with my notes. I only made a note of the upper eyelid ecchymosis, so I have to explain either the bottom part as being things that were so mild that it wasn't obvious at the time. I don't know what time this was taken. I certainly would willing to own that I may not have described it quite perfectly, but I did make note of the fact that there were ecchymosis of the eyelids.
And to be careful and not to mislead, you don't want to say a particular mark on the body was what you saw when you don't have a memory of it. Yes.
I didn't take a picture of it. Correct.
And because marks in the body can change over time.
They can.
I think I'm done, but I want to approach real quick.
Folks there, admonitions, no talking about this case, no researching. You guys know it at this point. I will be questioning you when you come back. And so we will go off the record, and counsel, if at any point you need to come back and chat, then the floor is open. Just come on back, okay?